There's a lot in Australian masculinity that we can treasure.
A lot of people are performing their masculinity.
Telling me the whole, you should shake a hand like this and you should try and crush another man's hand.
Text. Men in Focus. Practitioner Reflections 2. Men and Masculinities in Australia. Experiences and Reflections. Our watch acknowledges the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation as the traditional owners of the land on which this video was produced. We pay our respects to all traditional owners past and present, and recognize the continuing connection Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have to land, culture, knowledge and language for over 65,000 years, and their leadership in preventing violence against women. Our watch works to prevent violence against all women. We use the word women inclusively, meaning both cisgender and transgender women. Our watch logo. Participants in this video speak individually, whilst seated in a studio. A stylized image of Mac Cone appears. Mac sits on a weightlifting bench, surrounded by dumbbells. Text. Mac Cone, he they. Program Coordinator, R4 Respect, YFS.
There is 100% pressure on young men and boys to conform to masculinities.
A stylized image of Cassie Lindsay appears. She stands next to a volleyball net, with a ball at her feet. Text. Cassie Lindsay, she, her, co-founder, Red Consulting and Training.
And men and boys are feeling the rigidity of those stereotypes and norms.
A stylized image of Craig Rigney appears. Craig holds a bunch of carrots and smiles at the camera. Text. Craig Rigney, CEO, KWY Aboriginal Corporation, Wurundjeri man.
Men have an identity problem. There's the man I want to be versus the man people want me to be.
You can think or believe something and feel pressured to do another thing.
When we talk to men, they talk about wearing two uniforms to work, their masculinity uniform and their work uniform.
I didn't always feel like I fit into the stereotype of what it meant to be a man.
A stylized image of Cameron McDonald appears. Cameron sits on a rock, underneath a beach umbrella. A dolphin splashes out of the water behind him. Text. Cameron McDonald, he, him. Sector Engagement Lead, Our Watch.
And I used to have older men usually giving me crap when I was younger for having a limp handshake. Telling me the whole, you should shake a hand like this and you should try and crush another man's hand. It's a bit silly, but I think it's a good example of how, there's these ideas of how you should be if you're going to be a real man in Australia, and if you don't behave in certain ways, then what even are you?
One of the men went home and he had his hair in a pigtail, and his 3-year-old daughter said, "Dad, boys don't wear pigtails." And he just went, "Where has that come from?" And he actually went, "Well, I'm going to wear my hair in a pigtail because I need to play my part in showing that this is who I am and it's okay."
A stylized image of Jackson Fairchild appears. Jackson stands beside a garden and peers at the flowers. Text. Jackson Fairchild, they them primary prevention leader.
Growing up in Australia, there was a very strong script for me about what masculinity is and how I was expected to be a boy and how men were expected to be. And then, how women and girls were meant to relate to that. I felt very pressured to be straight, to be cisgendered. I felt very locked in. I was very worried about how to express myself, what I was allowed to be. And I saw a lot of pressure and a lot of violence around that too. I think Australia, in its history, both recent and going further back, there's a lot of being attached to being really stoic and really tough and really distant.
A stylized image of Ben Brown appears. Ben stands on a football field as a ball bounces past in the background. Text. Ben Brown, he, him, AFL player, Melbourne Football Club.
So many men don't fit the traditional masculine mould. It's not just me that felt like I didn't fit into the hyper-masculine football space, and a lot of men playing footy at AFL level don't. A lot of people are performing their masculinity.
Different communities of men in Australia are gendered as well. So for gay men and queer men, they're gendered in a way, or their masculinity is seen as lacking, or they're seen as too effeminate. Whereas for other communities of men, we see this kind of representation of their masculinity as a threat, or violent or aggressive, or too excessive.
A stylized image of Sarah Chong appears. Sarah smiles at the camera and an aeroplane flies over her head. Text. Sarah Chong, she, her, multicultural community leader.
that alludes to particular stereotype ideologies that some men are just born violent, that it's only particular communities that are violent, and that it's just part of their culture. And actually, it's not, because people are not born violent.
I'm biracial and I'm Middle Eastern, and it wasn't until I actually went back to my mother's home country and I was surrounded by men who were comfortable holding hands and hugging each other and kissing. But it all suddenly made sense, because those are all things that have felt natural to me from a young age.
For men of migrant and refugee background, their concepts of understanding what it means to be a man or masculinity there are far different to those of Anglo-Saxon background.
There are different ways in which men can experience privilege and have influence and access to resources, but also experience discrimination due to racism or ableism or poverty, or the impacts of colonisation on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander men, for example.
Our place in society isn't where we would want it to be. We don't have an equal footing. And we have these Western stereotypes as Aboriginal men we have to fit into. Now that's very different from acknowledging my male privilege. I want people to understand that too. I absolutely understand my place in society as a male and what safety that allows me. So the minute I put this cultural lens across it as an Aboriginal man in this country, I am very quickly disempowered.
A stylized image of Hala Abdelna appears. Hala is rock climbing. Text. Hala Abdelna, she, her, CEO and founder, Institute of Nonviolence.
Feminism's given me so much, feeling really empowered that I can reshape the way I was taught to be a woman in the world. What's it like for guys in the world? Because women had to have their own movement out of oppression. Men have let each other down by not jumping on the bandwagon. And it doesn't surprise me, because patriarchal structures have privileged men for so long that why would you change the status quo if it's working for you? I'm
still learning every day that there are many, many different viewpoints. I've had conversations with members of, the LGBTIQA+ communities that have been part of community football clubs and haven't felt welcome or haven't felt comfortable in those spaces. And these are places that I felt, for me, help to build my identity, and they're really important to people. So if we're excluding people from those experiences growing up, I think that's a massive hole that you're leaving in people's lives. There are people who love sport and who would love to be part of a football club, but if they don't feel like they can walk through the doors and feel comfortable, that's really sad.
In Australia, if we think about masculinity and some of the stereotypes, it's still absolutely to be straight. So gender and sexuality is very strongly interlinked in that way in what we expect. And to be noticeably straight in the world and to be recognised as that, you have to do your masculinity well.
I knew that I was different, but I could see that happening to the other boys around me too, even ones who have grown up to be cis and straight. I could see it really affecting them. They were also really afraid, and it was really restricting who they were. Even more so, that idea that you needed to not just be straight, but you needed to fit within a very rigid idea of what it meant to be a man.
Growing up as gay, definitely my masculinity felt lesser or lower than other young men in my class who were straight.
And I observed men around me who maybe did fit the description of societal expectations more, and to be honest, I didn't see how they were any happier or doing better.
A white Western-based system that we all live under, does it take into account the various subtleties from any other culture that is here in Australia, for better or for worse?
There's a lot in Australian masculinity that we can treasure. Stuff around mateship, about fairness, about giving people a fair go. Those are cultural ideas that I really like. There's some spaces in Australia amongst men where I actually feel really safe, blokes who are open and curious and brave.
In Australia, what do we say? We say it's the land of a fair go, right? But if we're not acknowledging what people are going through, or the oppression or the intersectionality, how is it really that fair?
Text. Supports available. 1-800-RESPECT. National Sexual Assault, Domestic Family Violence Counselling Service, 1-800-737-732, Men's Referral Service, operated by No to Violence, 1300-766-6491, Australian Human Rights Commission, 1300-656-419, 13 Yarn, 1392-76, Sane, we're people like you, 1-800-187-263, Q Life, 1-800-184527. This video is a part of a suite of Men in Focus practice resources produced by Our Watch and supported by the Australian Government Department of Social Services. Visit ourwatch.org.au. Our Watch, preventing violence against women.